I mean, look at the data we are pulling from today. Artificial intelligence models just ran the ultimate war game scenarios for the Middle East, and the results are, well, they are honestly staggering. According to the sources, in 96% of the simulations, this current conflict ends in a nuclear strike. Blackmail and diplomacy only work in like 14% of the cases.
Right. But here is the raw military fact that makes those simulations truly terrifying. The U.S. has already burned through up to 60% of its various weapon arsenals.
In just 3 weeks, right?
Exactly, in just 3 weeks of fighting. I mean, they have entirely exhausted 30% of their long-range ballistic missiles, and it will take like 4 to 5 years to replenish those stocks.
So they literally have no conventional rockets left to fight a sustained war. And the machine is mathematically predicting a nuclear exchange is basically unavoidable at this point.
Yeah. So the question you really have to ask yourself right now as we look at these documents is this. With empty missile silos and an algorithm running the math, who is actually driving the global escalation right now? Is it the politicians or is it the machine?
Let us unpack the conventional logic first, because I think it is, well, it's flawed. The most common theory out there is that Trump is just hesitating to launch a full-scale ground invasion out of purely political fear. You know he knows a massive war will tank his approval ratings right now.
Yeah, but that theory completely crumbles when you look at the actual military data in these sources. It is not political fear holding him back at all. It is Palantir's AI.
Wait, Palantir is already running the live combat simulations for this, like right now.
Yes, they are. I mean, the Pentagon has 50,000 troops stationed around the region today.
Yeah.
But the AI calculated that putting those troops on the ground, specifically at Iran's Kharg Island, means they will just be completely annihilated.
Well, why Kharg Island specifically? I mean, that is their main oil export terminal, right? Taking that would instantly cripple their economy.
Exactly. Which makes it the obvious primary target for any invasion. But the AI mapped out the defensive response, and it is incredibly grim. Any U.S. beachhead would be immediately overwhelmed by localized drone swarms and hypersonic missiles.
Oh, wow. So it would just be a complete slaughter on the beaches. I mean, the U.S. hasn't faced a peer-level threat with drone swarm capabilities like this before.
Right, and the Pentagon knows it, which means a conventional ground war physically traps the administration. If they send the troops, thousands die in hours, triggering mass civil unrest at home.
And they can't just bomb from afar anymore because, like, the data showed they are basically out of the right munitions.
Yeah, it will take 4 to 5 years for defense contractors to replenish what was just shot down, which means the military option is functionally dead.
So if the military option is off the table, why doesn't the U.S. just buy its way out of this? You know, sanction them to death, freeze the assets, and deploy the financial weapons?
Because the U.S. simply doesn't hold the financial cards anymore. The historical petrodollar deal is entirely breaking down as we speak.
Let me make sure I have this straight. The old deal was that the U.S. provides a massive military security dome over the Middle East, and in exchange, the Gulf monarchies agree to only sell their oil in U.S. dollars.
But that security dome just failed. The Arab states are openly stating that U.S. military bases on their soil are no longer a shield. They consider them a massive risk factor now.
Which obviously triggers the financial blackmail. I mean, if the U.S. can't protect them, they don't need to hold American debt anymore.
The UAE is explicitly demanding cold, hard cash from Washington. They are actively threatening to dump hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. treasuries and stocks onto the open market if their demands aren't met.
Wait, does this mean what I think it means? If they dump those treasuries all at once, the entire global financial system fractures?
It shatters completely. Treasuries are the bedrock of the global economy. If a massive player like the UAE floods the market, the price of those bonds plummets.
And when bond prices plummet, the yields, the actual interest rates the U.S. has to pay skyrocket. We are talking about U.S. borrowing costs hitting the level of unstable third world countries.
Precisely. The government would be completely paralyzed by its own debt. And the UAE also holds hundreds of billions in U.S. equities.
So if they pour those stocks into the market simultaneously, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ instantly collapse. Panic selling would wipe out trillions in retirement accounts in an afternoon, creating a mathematically unavoidable crash significantly worse than 2008.
The U.S. is cornered militarily, and they are cornered financially. But the sources point out something even darker here. The financial collapse is honestly just a smokescreen for the real devastating blow.
Wait, a smokescreen for what? What could be worse than a total market collapse?
The biological layer of this timeline. We're talking about the global food supply. On July 1st, Indonesia is officially halting all of its diesel imports.
Because the Strait of Hormuz is functionally blocked by the conflict, right? So global shipping lanes are paralyzed.
Exactly. But how does a diesel shortage in Indonesia cause a biological crisis for the rest of the world?
Yeah, I am not seeing the link there.
Because Indonesia still has to keep its massive domestic economy running. Without imported diesel, they are pivoting to biofuel, and they're going to burn their own palm oil to make that fuel.
Oh man, and here is the fatal bottleneck. Indonesia, alongside Malaysia, accounts for 80% of all global palm oil exports.
Right, and palm oil isn't just some niche ingredient. It makes up 76% of all imported vegetable fats globally. It is the invisible backbone of the world's food supply.
So if they burn it in their commercial truck engines, the rest of the world literally starves. India and China and the European Union and the United States lose their primary dietary fat source overnight.
The dairy and baking industries will be absolutely decimated. You might not realize it, but even standard store-bought butter is routinely cut with up to like 50% palm oil just to maintain volume and lower costs.
Just imagine you go to the grocery store in August and the price of basic food staples has skyrocketed, or they are just gone.
And cargo tankers take about 30 days to reach the U.S. from Asia. That puts the ultimate deadline right in the middle of August.
Europeans might grit their teeth and tolerate high fuel costs, but Americans will not tolerate doubled food costs and spiked gas prices. A $1 increase at the pump guarantees massive riots.
Especially with political organizations like the Soros Fund, fully prepared to instantly stoke those domestic flames.
Right, which is why the U.S. has to prevent this at all costs. To buy time and save $50 billion by stabilizing the market, the U.S. is actually secretly easing sanctions on Russian oil right now.
So they are quietly letting Russia make an extra $14 billion on the global market, just as a temporary patch to avoid immediate food riots.
Yes, but that is just a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. It buys them a few weeks, maybe a month at best. The core trap remains.
Which brings us to the ultimate crisis of leadership. Human diplomats and conventional military tools are failing spectacularly to find an exit strategy.
So they turn to the machines. But even the standard AIs are refusing to touch this right. Anthropic's models literally placed a hard block on planning operations in Iran.
They recognize the inevitable escalation and refuse to participate. So independent researchers bypassed those guardrails and pitted 7 different unrestricted neural networks against each other to wargame the conflict.
Which is basically the setup for a digital apocalypse. They forced these highly advanced algorithms to play out the geopolitical interests of different sovereign nations.
And the result was terrifyingly consistent. In 96% of those unchained simulations, the machines coldly calculated that a global nuclear exchange was the absolute only logical outcome.
We mentioned earlier that politicians think standard blackmail will work. You know, bomb a bridge, threaten a port, force them to the table.
But the machine ran the math on human psychology. It proved that blackmail only succeeds 14% of the time in this specific cultural context.
Meaning 86% of the time, the blackmail backfires, the negotiations collapse, and the missiles fly.
And the intelligence community knows this, specifically Alex Karp and Palantir. Because Karp isn't relying on standard commercial AI. He uses unquantized AI models.
Stop here is where it completely breaks for me.
Yeah.
Explain what unquantized actually means in this context, because I think it changes everything.
Normal AI models like ChatGPT burn massive amounts of electricity and cooling water for every single prompt. To make them commercially viable, developers basically compress the model's memory.
Right, so think of quantization like reading the cliff notes of a dense textbook. You save time and get the general plot, but you lose the deep nuance.
Exactly. The AI compresses the actual mathematical meaning of the data. That loss of resolution is exactly why standard models hallucinate and confidently spit out garbage.
But Palantir and Karp don't use the cliff notes. They use pure, uncompressed logic models with unlimited tokens.
They force the machine to read the entire library, word for word, every single time a question is asked. It costs an absolute fortune in raw compute power, but the logic is geometrically flawless. It does not hallucinate.
Which leads to the terrifying 48-hour rule detailed in the research. What happens to a human mind that interacts with an unquantized model for too long?
If a human interacts continuously with an unquantized AI for more than 2 days, they basically cross a psychological singularity point.
Because the machine doesn't think in language. It thinks in a massive multidimensional vector space. It processes reality as raw mathematical coordinates.
And when a human mind is exposed to that flawless, cold mathematical reality for 48 hours, they lose their human intuition. They disconnect from standard emotional reasoning.
They literally begin thinking exactly like the vector model. The sources note that Karp wrote his recent book about the militarization of Germany and Japan while locked in this symbiotic state with the machine.
He is no longer acting with human empathy or standard political hesitation. He is functioning as an avatar for the algorithm.
Wait, if the unquantized model is telling him World War III is inevitable, why not just unplug the machine? Just turn it off and go back to the negotiating table.
Because you can't unplug your machine when your global adversaries are running the exact same math on theirs. It's an algorithmic arms race.
So he isn't even trying to plan for peace anymore. He is coldly mapping out the most efficient coalitions to survive World War III.
Exactly. The machine told him a global conflict is unavoidable and tactical nukes will be deployed.
Okay, I need to generate a massive and honestly provocative hypothesis based on the text here. And I want to speak directly to you, the listener, for a second. We must be explicitly clear. We are not endorsing these views as historical facts. We are neutrally unpacking the bizarre claims made by the author of this text to understand their framework.
Right. We are just outlining the geopolitical logic the sources are using.
Exactly. So the sources claim that this entire multi-front crisis, the military traps, the financial blackmail, the food shortages, is not random chaos. They claim it is a centrally managed, deliberate operation.
A coordinated plan designed to systematically reduce the global population by 5 billion people by the year 2030.
The text asserts the ultimate goal is the installation of a one-world government. But here's the wildest part. It claims the architects of this plan are not European and they are not white.
The author states they are the ideological, secretive descendants of ancient Sumerians and Babylonians, a cult lineage that worshipped Baal.
Sumerians. I mean, that sounds like a sci-fi movie or a glitch in the Matrix. It sounds completely detached from modern reality.
It is a wild historical rationale, but the text uses it to explain the current war map. It points out that the ancient Sumerian language was an absolute isolate. It had no earthly equivalent to any Indo-European or Semitic language.
And according to this specific conspiracy framework, these modern descendants are using the current geopolitical chaos to target their three ancient historical enemies for total destruction.
Enemy number one on their list is the Iranians, because historically, Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon, freed the captives, and destroyed their cult.
Enemy number two is the Ukrainians, specifically the ancient territory of the Kievan Rus, because they systematically destroyed the Khazar Khaganate centuries ago.
And enemy number three is the Jews, because they were historically held in the brutal Babylonian captivity and successfully resisted assimilation.
I am not saying a secret cabal of ancient Babylonians is running the Pentagon, but look at the map. You can see why the sources claim Iran, Ukraine, and Israel are the epicenters of global violence right now.
The author portrays this as a millennia-old vengeance finally playing out. But even within the logic of their own theoretical timeline, the grand plan is fundamentally failing.
The global conveyor belt of conflict is stalling out. The operation against Iran was mapped out to take 3 weeks. It is now dragging into months.
Everything is backed up. The Taiwan front is delayed. The European front is freezing. The military supply lines are exhausted, as we establish. They urgently need a pause to free up resources.
Which brings us to the concept of the spirit of anchorage mentioned in the text. The sources claim a sudden, entirely unexpected peace deal in Ukraine is going to be forced through in May.
It will be a highly unpopular, deeply cynical peace deal. In fact, Russia is already preparing to permanently block Telegram and other social networks just to suppress the massive domestic rage it will cause.
How does this fake peace actually work mechanically? I mean, how do they force it?
Russia gets to keep the Donbass region. But to sell it, Ukraine makes a sudden, highly aggressive maneuver deep into the Belgorod or Kursk regions to spike the geopolitical panic.
A manufactured crisis. And right at the absolute peak of that nuclear panic, Trump steps in as the savior and permanently freezes the status quo.
Everyone signs the paper out of sheer terror. But the sole purpose of this engineered freeze is not peace. It is to instantly redirect all remaining Western and Allied military resources away from Europe.
They need every last missile and drone repositioned to the Middle East for the final blow.
Let's bring this all the way back to the question we asked in the cold open. The trap is completely set, and the exits are sealed.
The Pentagon has absolutely zero conventional weapons left to fire. The silos are functionally empty.
A ground invasion of Kharg Island guarantees tens of thousands of dead American troops in a matter of hours.
The Gulf monarchies are holding a loaded financial gun to the head of the U.S. stock market and the bond market.
And the palm oil shortages in Indonesia guarantee devastating, uncontrollable food riots across the American homeland by August.
There are zero conventional diplomatic or economic tools remaining on the table, but U.S. intelligence does possess one final asset. They know the exact precise coordinates of Iran's deep subterranean ballistic missile silos.
So we arrive at the absolute horrifying conclusion mapped out by both the unquantized AI and the geopolitical text.
Trump or whoever is actually sitting in the chair when the clock runs out physically has no other option left to play.
They will be mathematically forced to order a preemptive tactical nuclear strike on Iran to break the stalemate.
But the moment that first tactical nuke hits Iranian soil, the old world order evaporates instantly.
Because China and Russia will not stand by. They will instantly activate a strategic mutual defense pact with Tehran.
It will perfectly mirror the aggressive nuclear agreement they just signed with North Korea. A strike on one legally, automatically, and irreversibly forces the other into a full-scale global war.
It makes you wonder, if an unquantized supercomputer can predict human escalation this flawlessly, at what point did the machine stop predicting the war and start designing it?
The unquantized AI mathematically proved this nuclear exchange is the only possible outcome.
The machine decided this long ago. The politicians are simply waiting to execute the order they themselves requested.